So based on this concept, let us see that what are the broad control mechanisms for homeostasis. Well, there are feedback control mechanisms, and in feedback control mechanisms we have negative feedback and positive feedback control mechanism, and there is feed forward control mechanisms. So broadly there is feedback and feed forward. In feedback we have negative feedback and positive feedback mechanisms. So let us see the details of feedback control mechanisms. First we will try to understand what does the word feedback means. So this is the input, say suppose we were considering the temperature. So whatever is the current value of the temperature, it is sensed by the sensor and it goes via afferent to a control center, which compares this input which it has received with some set point or reference value and computes the difference between the two. Then via efferent it goes to the effector, and which brings about the response or the output. And because of this change in the response of the effector, there will be change in the output. That means suppose we are considering the body temperature, so this effector will cause a change in the body temperature. Okay, but feedback, what it will do is that this change which is brought about, so there will be a changed current value, it will again be fed back as input. So sensor will continuously detect the current value of the input. Plus there is external disturbance which is causing a change in the input. So one is the changes caused due to the effector which is bringing about the response or correction in the variable, and this is fed back as input, plus the disturbance that is suppose the external environment, right, it is causing a disturbance in the body temperature, so that is also integrated. So both these will determine the current value of the input which is sensed by the sensor, and this continues. So let's take an example of the system which we have discussed. Let's talk about blood pressure. So whatever is the current value of blood pressure is detected by the sensors, that is the baroreceptors. Then from baroreceptors via 9th and 10th cranial nerves, which act as afferents, the information is conveyed to the controller, which in this case is medulla. The controller compares this current value of the blood pressure with a set point or reference value, and then via the autonomic nervous system, that is the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves, it acts on the effectors, which are heart and blood vessels in this case, and this results in the change in blood pressure. So whatever change in blood pressure has occurred, again the current value of this blood pressure is fed back as input into the sensors, that is the baroreceptors. Plus there may be external disturbance. The external disturbance may be suppose change in posture. If somebody is standing from lying down position, that will also cause a change in blood pressure. So the current value of the blood pressure is determined by the disturbance as well as the response of the effectors. So this is continuously being fed into the system. We will see what is negative feedback and what is positive feedback. Actually this is an example of negative feedback system. But fundamentally in feedback system, the current value is always fed back as input into the system. Now these responses can be either neural, hormonal or neurohormonal. That means the afferents which we are talking about in this case are nerves, and the efferents also in this case are nerves. So this is an example of neural feedback control system. But there may be hormonal feedback control systems as well, where the release of the hormone is changed, right? And it is acting as the effector, which will bring about the changes in the functioning of the body system. And then there may be neuroendocrine system also, where the neurons are also involved and hormones also are involved. So this integration which we were talking in the beginning, that it acts as a teamwork. There is integrated control of all the body systems. So they can be either neural, hormonal or neurohormonal, what is known as neuroendocrine system. So, in feedback systems, output is always fed back as input into the system. But we had said that there are different types of feedback system. There is negative feedback and positive feedback. So, what is the meaning of this negative and positive feedback? In negative feedback, if there is a decrease in the value of the input, say suppose there is BP, if there is decrease in BP, then the system will result in increase in the output, that is increase in BP, and this again will be fed back as input into the system. So, there is continuous monitoring going on. By feeding the output back as input, the system is able to continuously monitor the value of the variable. Anyways, so that was the example that if BP decreases, the system will try to increase the BP, and in case BP increases above the normal range or above the reference value, the system will try to decrease the output or decrease the BP in the example which we are seeing, and again it will be fed back as input into the system. So, that is negative feedback. Then second feedback system is positive feedback system. Positive feedback, what it will do is that if there is increase in the input value, positive feedback will increase the output of the variable. So, if the value of the variable is increasing, the value of the variable will further increase because of the action of the system. So, it is amplifying the value of the variable, and again the output is fed back as input, and again it is further increased. So, it is kind of a vicious cycle going on, that it will keep increasing if the input is increased. On the other hand, if the input is decreasing and positive feedback is acting, then it will continuously tend to decrease the output, which will further be fed back as input. Okay, so hope you understand the difference between negative feedback and positive feedback. Negative feedback, if input increases, output decreases. Positive feedback, if input increases, output is further being amplified if the input is increasing, and vice versa. So, before we proceed, let us see some properties of the negative feedback loop. So, we said that there is an input, and the input is fed into the controller, which then computes the difference between the set point or reference value with that of the input which it has received, and it generates an error signal. So, set point or reference value minus the input which it has received generates an error signal, and which is important for the output to the effectors, which bring about the correction, that is the change in the variable which is being regulated, which we have seen that this variable now it is affected by two things. One is external disturbance and the effector response, and again this is continuously being sensed by sensor and it is giving the signal to the controller. Fine. But with this loop, you might have understood that there is something time lag, because the afferents will take some time, no? The time it reaches to the controller, then controller will also take time for generating error signal, then again there will be output. So, this loop is taking some time to act while the disturbance may be continuously present. Okay. So, this time lag is important because it defines negative feedback loop in certain terms. Why? Because of this time lag, this system has oscillations. What does it mean? That whenever there is a change in the value of the variable, which always happens, the value of the variable, because of continuous disruptions by the activity of the cell and by the surroundings, there will always be some disruptions in the value of the variable. So, when this value reaches to the control center, it takes some time to act. So, it will try to bring it back towards the normal reference range. But because of the time taken, and also the control center may not be perfect, okay. So, it tries to overcorrect it. So, in trying to bring it towards normal, actually the value decreases a bit. So disruption has caused an increase in the value, and with the control center trying to correct it, it causes a decrease in the value. Again, this is sensed by the sensor, because we said that it is continuously detecting the current value of the variable. Again, the system tries to correct it. So this leads to oscillations in the negative feedback system. So the variable is not a constant value, it keeps on changing up and down. If we continuously measure it over a period of time, we will not get a constant value, it will go up and down. One example of this increased oscillations in negative feedback system in disease state is Cheyne-Stokes respiration. In Cheyne-Stokes respiration, either the center doesn't act properly, or the time lag increases too much, and that is the reason that we get hyperventilation in Cheyne-Stokes respiration, which causes too much change in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. That means the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is completely washed out. So partial pressure of carbon dioxide becomes too low. So this is conveyed to the center very late, right? So by the time it is conveyed, PCO2 becomes very less. So it leads to apnea. So it is getting late information. So it leads to complete stoppage of the respiration, that is apnea. Then again, with apnea, what will happen? PCO2 will start rising, but the information is conveyed to the center very late. So it detects, okay, there is too much rise in PCO2, and again there is an exaggerated response of the center causing hyperventilation, and this cycle continues. Okay. So those were the properties of a loop of the negative feedback control system.